Hi guys, my guest today is David Hunter. Now, David Hunter is the co-founder, in fact, the founder and CEO of ASAPmaps. ASAPmaps is a service that connects with your Google My Business listings to help you reach more customers. When your business uses ASAPmaps, the always time-consuming and often technical work of getting your business on Google is now done by them. So, David, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Raj. I'm glad to be here.
Well, tell me a little bit about yourself, David. I want to hear about yourself and your role at ASAPmaps.
Sure. So we are just a small startup. We're located in Pennsylvania in the U.S., right near the Great Lakes, just outside of north of Pittsburgh. And you know, I have been basically running a digital marketing and web development SEO firm for the last decade. That's called Epic Web Studios. And we've got about 400 or so clients that are really all over the country, small, medium-sized businesses, all the way up to a couple Fortune 500s and publicly traded entities. And we've had a lot of success through that organization and realized that a lot of our clients, you know, on all ends of the spectrum, were ignoring or unaware of the importance that local search optimization had in their business's visibility. And we would almost just automatically create listings for them using, you know, Google My Business and their Google account, and realize that this is a very time-consuming process. And in order to have any type of visibility, it can get quite technical if you're not very nitpicky with all the details. It's by no means some sort of rocket science, but it really is quite nitpicky and, like I said, very time consuming. So we realized that with the growth of the Google My Business platform and Google's understanding that you know, they make more money when you stay on google.com as opposed to leaving and going to a website. Once they realized that, they started to bump up the importance of their local listings product, which runs on top of basically Google Maps and is called Google My Business. Knowing that and seeing that trend, we decided that we should form a new startup that is really like a SaaS product. It's sort of a hybrid SaaS where we focus solely on the listings, and that's how ASAPmaps was born. I am the CEO and the founder, and we've got, you know, a whole number of different folks within the support team, the operations team, the marketing side, you know, of course, the sales side as well. So.
Tell me a little bit about the USP of your business. I mean, how is that you different from other tools in the market today?
Sure. So, you know, we're a little bit different because while we will handle things like directory listings, your citation data, things like that, it's less of a focus. Our primary focus is just within the Google My Business listing. Because we realize that is really where most of the traffic and the visibility is coming from. There's really not anyone out there that's sort of squarely focused on GMB, and so I think we're pretty unique in that aspect. Beyond that, we actually manage the listings for you, as opposed to some of the other tools out there, which will essentially, you know, pure SaaS where you have to do all of it yourself, and it just assumes that you know the nuances of how to run a successful listing, and that you're in there every week making the changes, etc. We do all of this for you, and it still kind of fits within that same you know, subscription model business.
So say I'm a local butcher, and I've got, like, you know, I just started a new company. I just myself on Google Maps. Tell me, I mean, would you come and you'll do the listings for me, put the pictures up, the videos up, well, pictures up for sure, and you'll do the entire thing for me? Is that the way you operate?
Correct. Yeah. In fact, let's say you ultimately you just go to asapmaps.com and you click get started. All we really need from that butcher. Now, let's say they've got sort of an established business that's been around a couple of years, or even if a couple months, whatever. The chances are that they've already got a listing on Google My Business. It's very possible that that listing has some confusion within it because let's say the address was a different butcher previously, or a different business entirely, or the phone number had changed, or any number of those things could be coming to play there. So the first thing that we do is kind of fix and clean that physical address as well as the business's listings themselves, get them kind of consolidated into one to remove any duplicates, etc. That's a very often manual process because our team, we like to call it deep search. We'll go in and essentially make sure that there's no other instances of that name, address, phone number showing up anywhere but within that listing itself. That's sort of the first step of the process. Once you've got an absolutely clean listing and everything looks good, we go in and start to kind of enable some benchmarking, right? We will essentially run a report and say, all right, because we've got the Google API access, we can get 12 months of history, and we'll run a report that pulls all 12 months and set those as sort of a baseline and say, all right, well, prior to using us, this was what was happening each month. And then from there, we will, once those benchmarks are set, we will begin the actions. The other thing that we do is purchase a call tracking number and insert that into the primary phone listing, and then we move their existing number down to the alternate slot to keep the citation data clean. And now that we've got a call tracking number in there, it becomes a lot easier to find the actual metrics of how many actions are taking place on the listing, because as you probably know now, the Google listings have like there's a button to say call me, and that only shows up on a mobile device. So if you're on a desktop, you're out of luck in terms of getting tracking enabled, right? The user would just simply have to dial a number, and there's no way Google can know of that, right? So we've basically clean and clear the listing, move all duplicates, etc. Step 2 is to enable all the benchmarking and the traffic, the traffic measurement. And then step 3 is we go and start to fill the listing with any data that was previously missing. And most times it's photos and like the business photos and Google Posts. Those are a huge issue. We will make sure that it's seeded with at least 10 images up front, and then from there we put up a new image each week. The imagery comes off of the client's website or their socials. If they don't have anything like that, then we'll go sort of industry type of imagery and make sure that that some stuff gets in there. The client, of course, has the opportunity to kind of review and leave feedback if they wanted to like make sure, if they didn't like that photo for whatever reason, there's plenty of time for them to kind of leave that response. We do the same thing with the Google Posts. And when we do this with each of those, what's a little different from just a normal upload the photo is we're making sure that that photo is as optimized as possible, right? Local search products like Google My Business don't really have a lot of opportunity like a traditional website to get things like your headings and your key phrases and your contextual search stuff enabled. So we've got to use the tools that are available to us within GMB. Photos, business photos, and Google Posts are a huge set of tools. And so when we put the photo up, it's basically filled with all kinds of extra metadata like keywords, the EXIF data, which is the geolocation of the image so that it appears to be an authentic image to that business. All titles, author tags, everything gets filled in, and then the photo goes up. That way it gives it every possible chance for visibility within the map pack. Once the photos and the posts have been kind of queued up and they're scheduled, we then move on to the review side of it. We give our clients the opportunity to respond to reviews if they prefer. Otherwise, we will handle the responses. We typically tell them, look, if there's, and Google really cares about reviews. They do. But surprisingly, it seems to be less about the number of stars that your review has. It's more about the frequency of the review that you're getting and whether or not there's interaction on it, meaning did the business owner respond to the review, right? It's less about 2 stars or 5 stars and more about does the review have, some response by the owner. If it does, Google looks at that favorably and will reward you, right? So we want to make sure that every review that comes in gets a response on a regular basis. And like I said, we give them about, I think it's 72 hours from when the initial review comes before we will put a response in so that the business owner can have a chance to handle it themselves if they prefer. We've got a whole set of guidelines for them so that, we can sort of help them understand whether what the sentiment of the review was, which is important at sort of that 3-star middle level. Was this, middle positive or middle negative, and what the responses would be. So that's done on kind of a continual basis. We encourage like at least 1 review to come in at a minimum of every 90 days. We'd really like to see them every 30 days, at least 1, so that you've got, some relevance in terms of the time, and there's not a time decay going on that. Google, to step back a little bit, Google really has only a couple of indicators that make a difference in terms of local search. It's proximity, prominence, and relevance. Those, you can go back to the patents and you'll find those 3. Well, there's nothing anyone can do about proximity, right? It's just where the person is standing that they provide, that they do the search. Nothing we can do to alter that. But prominence and relevance, those can make a difference. And that's where interacting with the reviews so that they've got more visibility, making sure the photos go up and they're authentic and that there's a lot of good data behind them, helps with that in terms of prominence and relevance.
That's really, really interesting, Dave. Thanks a lot for that. But just going to check, in terms of the actual scale you have today, number of customers, for example,
Sure.
and number of users currently, would you give us a number, for example, of users versus customers and the total number of customers, for example?
So actually, as of tomorrow, I believe, we will have hit 1 full month of the system being launched. So, we're really not quite up and out the door as much as, as much as probably some other folks that you've done these fireside chats with. We're just a month old. But in that time, we've got about 300 or so clients that are in there. And we've had couple thousand people hit the website. So, we're finding that if you've made it to the site, you're generally coming in and converting into a client, which is great. So of the 300 or so active clients, they've had some pretty good successes so far. I will also say that we took about 40 clients and we, before we launched publicly, we grabbed about 40 clients from our primary agency, Epic Web Studios, and we moved them in there on like a beta and had them test for, I think it was almost 9 months, maybe almost a full year, that we ran through and sort of tested our entire thesis in terms of proximity, prominence, relevance, and how can we affect that stuff. We had some really awesome results out of those 40. I think that just 2 out of the 40 had some generally not as impressive of growth as we'd like. The other ones, we're seeing massive jumps. I mean, 30% increases sort of as a blanket statement, 30% increase across the board in terms of the phone traffic and the website visits. Driving directions had a significant jump as well, but more than anything, the photo views, of course, because no one was really addressing photos. The photos had it was something like 7,500% increase, just ridiculous numbers in terms of the photo visibility. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, this is really interesting data. As we talk a little bit about this, I mean, how are you getting the customers who are not current customers from Epic Studios? Are you getting them through SEO, content, direct sales? What is that you're doing?
So every one of those, right? It's we want the entire machine to be working, and we're still kind of refining that process. But it's set up to be a mix of inbound and outbound. Inbound is obviously the promised land when they can just simply find you through organic SEO methodology. I mean, that's fantastic, but you cannot rely on that alone. We've got a lot of different retargeting going on within socials, within display network. We don't have any search ads through Google Ads up just yet because it's a very competitive market. It's a very pricey, game to play. And I think that we'll probably get there, but for the time being, we wanted the data kind of to drive a decision as to where we want to target in terms of search ads. So it's a mix of all of these things. In terms of outbound, cold outreach is absolutely a good way to approach this, using tools like Albatross to see who's been to the site, and then doing some account-based marketing on that end. Of course, that always helps. And then once they're in there, I mean, depending on the size of the location, this could be sort of a medical client, like a hospital, where the hospital will have its primary listing, but in addition to that, Google also created automatically listings for each department in the hospital. So that's, typical hospitals, about 30 or so. But really where the excitement is the practitioner listings, right? Every physician, whether they know it or not, has a Google My Business listing, and it's typically tied to that hospital in some form or fashion. So we were talking with a hospital up in Boston the other day. They have about 30 departments, and then there's a total of 2,000 physicians within that system, right? So if we were to bring that client on board, you're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars in terms of the out the door revenue on it. And so that's a big deal. That's more of an account-based marketing approach. Whereas the sort of mom and pop, I'm a candy store, a butcher, like you mentioned, those are going to have a, more of an automated induction sequence where, once they get started, we ask them, okay, now add your listing, just give us sort of name and phone number. From there, add your payment details, start your subscription, and then, kind of keep an eye out, because we'll kind of, like I said, clean it and take it from there. So depending on the size of the offering is sort of how the sequence is kind of tailored. But once they're in there, there's a lot of basically, sort of automated emails that are triggering based on their actions. If they add the listing but didn't add the payment details, if they added the payment details but didn't start the subscription, a lot of email triggering to bring you back in.
That's great. And in terms of numbers, could you give us some numbers of what might cost? Is it like, obviously you want to look at as a SaaS company to some extent, which I know you're a service company and a SaaS company from what you just mentioned.
Yeah.
You want to have an element of some way you can increase your revenue and have net negative churn, for example. How are you, for example, upselling, or what is your current model? Just can you give us some prices, for example?
Sure. So at a base, I mean, in terms of the base pricing, you could find that just right on our website. It starts, and I think that currently it's too expensive, but that's okay. It'll come down eventually. We need more automation to kind of come in to bring the cost down. But because there's a lot of manual work by, like, our team is like true professionals. They've all got like almost 10 years of experience in this. So that's not a cheap endeavor. But it starts at basically $199 a month US, and then it goes down from there based on how many listings you have. Down like that, the hospital I mentioned, they would go down to about $49. And that's just because of the hard costs of, the Google API access. That's every time you query, there's a couple dollars there. The call tracking number, you've got to purchase that. The citation stuff, we'll go in and add them to a bunch of different directories. That costs. So there's hard costs, and then there's man hours involved. So that's about as low as it's going to get. Now, in terms of upselling and add-ons, et cetera, once we've got the next stage of this actually is to enable SMS. The call tracking numbers we purchase have SMS and MMS, like a picture message capability on them. So We're logging all those numbers. The plan is to make it so that we will essentially deploy the call tracking number to, as soon as someone were to call that butcher shop, when they hang up, they're going to get a text message automatically that says, hey, thanks for calling the butcher shop. We've got lots of great updates. Would you like them, right? So they have to opt into it. But if they were, press 1 for yes, press 2 for no. If they opt in, at that point, we're going to allow them to, as the business owner, they'll be able to send targeted messages out as much as they'd like. They can segment those phone numbers into groups if they prefer. And then beyond that, of course, this will be designed to help drive more reviews, right? Nothing better than like, I've got your phone number, I'm going to text you at a logical time to ask you for a review. So that'll be sort of the next step up from this. And as of right now, to scale, there's really not going to be an additional cost. We just simply have to build it out. Once we've got it built and it's running, that'll just be part of the offering, and it'll stay the same, base pricing. So if anything, I'm going to try to bring our costs down through some of that automation, right? Really the first step of the whole, like, get the listing, get it verified, clean, claim, and clear everything out. The more automation we can put behind that, the lower, man hours are involved, and thus, it's going to bring the cost down, which I think will make it a more attractive offering. In terms of, upselling, beyond even this, where there's additional potential, I mean, you can kind of pick and choose at this point, right? Like, what about the idea of offering local service ads, service area ads, where we sell Google advertising to them directly, because we know that butcher shop, they'll do really well with a 10-mile radius ad. Why not offer a very simple sort of campaign for something like that? But that's really on the roadmap in terms of like future. So we've being a month out, we really have to solidify the core offering first, and then we can look at some of that in maybe a year or so.
That's fantastic. What I like is the example of the hospital, where you can actually look at ways to, like, sort of potentially upsell. And obviously, typically they will have branches, they will have different areas that you can expand into. So there's an opportunity to really upsell that,
Yes.
Get references. That's fantastic, David. Listen.
In fact, the thing is, there's really not the hospital, like, this is a new area for them. There's no way they're going to sign up all 2,000 of those doctors right now. You bring them in and say, look, let's look at the hospital itself, all 30 departments, and then maybe the chiefs of each department, right? So you bring in 100 listings to start, and then from there, prove it, grow it, and you adopt more people in. And I'll tell you, that example specifically, we've got a little scoring tool right on our website, which kind of helps you tell the story very quickly. You just put your listing in as it appears on Google My Business. It'll give you a score right away, and it'll tell you whether you're verified, whether you have photos, whether you have reviews. The scores were coming back at 30%. I mean, just miserable, right? And this is a world-renowned hospital. There's no reason it should be like that. They had 3 reviews and they were not great. Beyond that, we started looking at the practitioners, and the chief neurosurgeon was actually listed as working for a different hospital because he had worked there years back, and that's where the listing was. Then we found one where there was a physician who was successfully sued in 2011 along with the hospital. And once that lawsuit ended, obviously he did not work there any further. You go look this gentleman's listing up. It was a sexual discrimination lawsuit too, which is just the worst. And you go look it up, and sure enough, he is listed as working there still. And this is years back, so
Shocking.
just looking, I mean, they're their own worst enemy in a lot of ways. And so just pointing that stuff out, they didn't even realize that it exists. That sort of helps sell it and tell the story very clearly.
That's fantastic, David. Well, listen, now we're going to jump right into from ASAPmaps into just a little bit to know a little bit about yourself. It's called the rapid fire questions. There are 5 of them for you. So you're just going to ask the questions, quick answers, and let's just get into that action mode now. So
Sure.
First of all, what tool is your go-to tool in marketing, except your own tool, obviously?
Gosh, hard to say. I mean, can you count Slack? It's not really a marketing tool, but we use that every day, all the time. I'm really liking Albacross. I mean, that's a relatively new one, but I guess my number one tool is Mailgun, right? I mean, that's just used as far as cold outreach. We use that day in, day out, and it's of such importance that I almost take it for granted because it's there running just about everything in terms of our sequencing.
That's a good one there. Number two, what is or are myths in selling or marketing you wish you knew before?
Say again?
What myths or sort of, misinformation in marketing or sales you wish you knew before you started your business, or say last year, for example?
Boy, that's a good question. What myths are out there? That I guess, you know what, this is maybe a really ancient one, but I used to not believe in Google Ads. I used to think that it was too expensive and not worth your time. And so we didn't put a lot of focus on it. Now, that was probably 7 years ago, but we realized the importance of it. And once we realized that, we've really started to explode it. And so I think that the myth that's out there is that Google Ads are expensive. I was even alluding to it earlier in our chat, that Google Ads are expensive, but they are not. It's really about optimizing them the right way, and then you can get a really strong return on your investment.
I like that. Who doesn't like ROI, eh?
Yes.
Next question. I'm going to cut you there, David. Next question. Your top go-to book for marketing or sales?
Oh man. Well, I don't know if you want to call it a book or what, but and it's not really like a practitioner type of a book, but Mark Cuban put out his first book from years back, and just reading his story really, it resonated with me. He talks about sort of driving through these, ritzy neighborhoods and like sort of visualizing the success that he wanted to have. And that resonated with me. And I felt like I had already been doing that. And I don't know, I think Mark Cuban's book is fantastic.
Well, Mark Cuban is definitely a genius. I can't agree more. Question number 4, if you had the ability to go back 5 years, what would you do differently from a business perspective?
Well, we talked about Google Ads, sure, but it's a tricky question because it's, I guess, if you had the revenue, whatever, right? If I could go back 5 years, I think that I probably would have put more of a focus on HR, believe it or not, because I when we were younger, I just didn't think of it, think about it too much. But now I step back and can see the true cost of hiring and hiring the right people to do the job, as opposed to hiring the convenient person. So I think I learned probably the hard way that it's worth paying the extra money for the better practitioner, for the better professional, the more experienced professional. It will pay you dividends 10 times over. So I think that's something that we probably would have done differently, from years ago.
I agree. I think while scaling up the business, I think the right people make all the difference.
So important. Yeah.
Absolutely. The last question, David, where can we learn more about you and your business?
ASAPmaps.com, no question. That's the best place to look. But of course, I'm on Twitter. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn. You name it, we can be reached. And we're pretty transparent and open. So I'm not a very hard guy to find. But yeah, I mean, be short of our website. Check us out on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, any of the socials.
David, it's been absolutely talking to you today. A lot of things to learn from you today, but Google Maps through ASAPmaps and optimization. So I think everyone's going to love this feature. It should be out soon. And let's keep in touch. Well done, you, David.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right.